Welcome everyone to NSTA Web Seminars, where you can find live interactive learning at your desktop. Tonight's presentation is titled Science Instructional Leadership in an Era of New Standards. Our featured presenter tonight is Kiehle, and we will also be hearing from Salvador Fernandez and Adaliz Gonzalez. My name is Bryn Slate, and I will be moderating this evening, and Jeff Lehman is online to provide technical support. Just a reminder to visit the NSTA Learning Center, which is your online portal for over 10,000 resources for science educators. And we're always adding new information there to the Learning Center. We're currently at 10,400 plus resources, and you'll see that over a third of those are free at the 3,600 plus mark, which is really exciting. You can add those resources to your library to access when it's convenient for you. And our community forums are a really great way for you to interact with other science teachers and other instructional leaders as well. Our online advisors are excited to help you find the information that you need. You can access them by clicking on that live support button. And our free tools are a great way for you to document your learning, to organize it, and to reach your learning goals. It's all available by going to learningcenter.nsta.org. And now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Wendy Binder is from the National Science Teachers Association here. She's my colleague in our Professional Development Department, and she's going to be providing some further information on our presenters this evening. We've got Kiehle as our feature presenter. Dr. Salvador Fernandez is from Inwood Intermediate School 52 in New York City, as is Adaliz Gonzalez. At this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to Wendy. Wendy, don't forget to turn on your talk button.
Thank you, Bryn. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm good?
You're good to go.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I was saying that I'm thrilled to see 67 people jumping in to hear about instructional leadership. As Bryn said, I work in the Professional Development Department at NSTA. I'm one of the program directors. I've been a teacher for over 20 years, and I've been in PD for quite a while as well. And tonight I want to just give you a little context for the program as well as the presenters. One of the projects that I am point here at NSTA is something called the GE Science Advisors Initiative. Through the generosity of the GE Foundation, NSTA has received a grant to work with 7 urban districts that received math and science grants from the GE Foundation to improve K-12 math and science. One of which is New York City, which is why we have 2 people from Inwood Intermediate School. Through my work with these 7 urban districts that has been going on for several years now, we do ongoing professional development in many different areas, one of which has been on STEM integration and now also how STEM fits into NGSS. In working with the 7 districts, we have intensive summer programs down at Kennedy Space Center, and one of our lines of learning has been instructional leadership, and Kiehle is someone that I've known for a very long time that I brought in to work with the districts. And in that work, we've found that there was so much that we could learn from Caroline and her work in Washington State that applies to the challenges that we're all facing in light of Common Core and NGSS. And our GE Foundation districts, one of which, as I said, is New York, have been charged with rolling out Common Core and also working on STEM integration and now NGSS. So I'm just going to say something briefly about Caroline's background so that you have an idea of the wealth of knowledge and expertise that she brings to us tonight. Hang on, I'm switching to Word. Caroline is based in Seattle. She's the Associate Director of PD at the Center for Inquiry Science, which she co-founded, that was formed within the Institute for Systems Bio in Seattle. And basically her work is around bringing systemic change to K-12 math and science education using a systems approach. In her work, she has worked with classroom teachers, instructional leaders at all levels, as well as working with districts to develop strategic partnerships such as the one that GE has with the New York City school that you'll be hearing from tonight. So tonight, Caroline is going to share some of her fieldwork and experience around instructional leadership and the importance of it, especially when you're going through a change such as trying to speak to Common Core and NGSS at the same time. So having said all that, I'm going to pass it over to Bryn. Do you want me to pass it to you or to Caroline?
We can go right over to Caroline to get started.
Thank you, Wendy. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Caroline.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, I should say. I'm on the West Coast in Seattle, and it's still a sunny, nice day out. I'm really happy to be here. I've also got a colleague with me in the room, Pat Ehrman, and Pat and I are going to, at times, trade off a little bit to give you some concrete examples of the work in our region. But I'm happy to be your facilitator tonight through these slides, and at the end of the presentation I have my email. I would be happy to follow up later one-on-one with anybody who's interested. So first of all, I want to just orient the group to our program tonight, thinking about the work of instructional leaders in the era of standards. We're really talking about the Common Core state standards for mathematics and English language arts and our soon-to-be published Next Generation Science Standards. So the first part, which is the square highlighted in green there, is going to be to look at what challenge do we share as a group of instructional leaders in this audience group tonight. Then we'll move down to look at how do we put some of this vision into practice. And I'll present a new tool for the instructional leaders who are from Wendy's GE project that she just described. And then in part 3, we'll review a tool that many people have used for years and years and years, but it might be a good idea to renew our use of the CBAM tools. So that may or may not be new to some of you. Then the last part I'm very excited about. We've got a story about what's working in schools now from the Inwood Intermediate School in New York City. So our evening tonight is broken into those 4 parts, and I'm ready to start. I'm from the Institute for Systems Biology, and I just want to spend a few seconds telling you a little bit about that. Our founding scientist was just awarded last Friday the National Medal of Science by President Obama. So we're very excited about that. And the work here in Seattle is really visionary in terms of the science research that's being done here at the Institute for Systems Biology. It's truly a STEM organization. So I'm fortunate in that I get to work with lots of different STEM professionals in their daily work. And then, as Wendy described, we started an education group within the Institute to support the professional development of K-12 teachers all across Washington State. So today I want us to think a little bit about the survey you took in the opening. We have 3 elementary teachers, 13 middle school teachers, 17 high school teachers, a couple of coaches, and maybe 1 principal. And as people are joining, we probably have more in all those categories. But I want us to think about even the classroom teachers. Think about this blue outer circle. We often find these circles of learning are really helpful in our work because often in our conversations and our professional development with schools, we focus only on the yellow and the green circles in your diagram. Today we want to focus on that blue outer ring. So as a classroom teacher, I'd invite you to really think about expanding your view of today's seminar to that outer ring, thinking of yourself as an instructional leader either in your own classroom or your own school building, perhaps even across your whole school system. So this blue outer ring will be the focus of our conversations we have together for the next hour or so. And let me just say a word about that blue outer ring as we get going here. The instructional leaders are oftentimes defined as a principal, sometimes as a coach, a science or math coach, for example, but oftentimes it can be a teacher leader as well. So regardless of the role that you told us about in the survey, let's all put on that hat of the instructional leader for your particular school system. So I wanted to take just a moment and give us a little refresher. The Common Core state standards are being implemented in all of your school systems now across the country. And the major shifts that are called for in these new Common Core standards are on this slide. There are three major ones, and I just want to review those quickly. The strong focus of time and effort put into the same focus in the standards. So our same focus that the students should have will be our same focus for professional development and for other work by the school districts. Coherence is thinking across these grade levels from K to 12 and really weaving together the major topics in those standards. The rigor in the Common Core is really focusing on building this conceptual understanding in each student and building their perseverance, their skills, and their ability to apply their mathematics learning. There's a similar set of shifts in the next generation science standards that are not yet published, but we do have the frameworks for science education that have been produced with a set of complementary shifts for science education. So let's just look at this slide for a moment that shows the shifts that are called for in our soon-to-be published next generation science standards. K-12 science reflects the real world. It has practices highlighted just as the Common Core state standards do. The practices and the cross-cutting concepts in science should be integrated throughout each grade level. These concepts are designed to be built coherently, such as through learning progressions across all the grades. These standards and practices and cross-cutting themes focus on a really deep understanding and having students being able to apply their science understanding into situations. Science and engineering are integrated for the first time in our standards, and these have been written on purpose to coordinate with the Common Core state standards for math and English language arts. So as instructional leaders, we have these two slides to kind of look back and forth on a lot as we go through the seminar today. These two sets of shifts are really the main focus that will drive our decision making and our steps for action in our school systems. And many of you have been working on these already. So in a little bit we'll have time to get some of your input on how you are attending to these shifts in both of these new standards. I just want to go back for a moment and show you the shifts in the Common Core. For example, the third one, the rigor, and then I'm going to move forward to the NGSS number 2. Those are very comparable. I could go back and forth, but these two sets of shifts in our standards for K-12 students are very comparable, designed that way on purpose. And they will really help our work in making common and consistent messages to teachers as we implement new standards into all our schools and into our entire school district systems. This vision for science education I put in here just as a refresher for most of us. We've been delving deeply into these frameworks. Hopefully many of you have even been giving your input into the design of these. Just take a moment to yourself and read this vision for science education. I'm going to pause for a moment. So this is just a nice quote to remind us that these shifts in thinking about our education for students, in whether it's in science or similarly in the Common Core standards, we have the same focus as an instructional leader to make this vision turn into action. So we're going to take a moment here, and I'm hoping you will reflect on these shifts for a moment and then type in some ideas on the screen into this box about what is our shared challenge. Again, thinking about that blue outer circle, the role of an instructional leader. So leave your classroom hat off for a moment and think about the instructional leader in your building or in your school system. What is our challenge for implementing these new standards? I'll give us a moment to type in some responses and then we'll continue together.
Thanks, Caroline. And folks, since we've got a lot of educators in the room with us, almost 80, we will take some volunteers to type on the screen here, and then everyone else, we definitely welcome you to type in the chat. So if you would like to volunteer to put your idea up on the screen, it's an exciting way to get the dialogue going. Go ahead and use your raise hand button. That's right under your own name. And I see that we've got Mark and Shannon. Okay, so we'll take Mark and Shannon for this one. I'll go ahead and give you the tools. Melissa will get you next time, so just be ready to raise your hand for the next one. But Mark, you've got the tools. Shannon, you've got the tools. And Melissa, feel free to type there in the chat, and we'll get you on the next discussion. Everyone else, it looks like we've got some awesome ideas coming into the chat, Caroline. So I'll turn it over to you while folks are typing, and then you can discuss what you've got in terms of responses.
Thank you, Bryn. I'm reading while you're typing. Thank you all for giving your input. This is exciting. Time is a challenge. Integrating science and engineering is a challenge. Coherently putting the practice in action while supporting the reading and writing in Common Core. Less and less time each school year for a greater amount of depth. I see keeping everyone on the same page. These are all really, really interesting ideas. I'm going to pause for a moment while a few of you are still finishing typing. Professional development for classroom teachers is a big challenge we all share, I see. Yeah, no, the one I just see, having the time and necessary supplies to execute inquiry. We're still working on this huge reform toward inquiry science, right? At the same time that now we have new standards, often new teacher evaluation systems. There are many initiatives in the climate right now. Thank you all for your feedback. I'm going to keep these in mind as we move forward, and I'll keep pausing periodically to get your ideas about how we're addressing these challenges for you. So I'm going to move ahead and just remind you that a couple times during the presentation I'm going to share some of my favorite resources, and at the end of the slideshow I'll also have a combined resource list. But for this first section, these are two resources that I've found really helpful in addressing these challenges for new standards, especially talking about creating common visions and call to action statements to make with groups that you work with. Okay, so as we move forward today, this next part now is getting us to be thinking about instructional leadership and how do we put this vision and this climate of new standards into action in the classrooms. We know from change research that in order for an implementation such as new standards to take hold, the change has to happen in every individual classroom. So how do we make that happen? The next part of our work together today, I'm going to introduce this idea of a problem of practice as a potential solution to this key question. So let's think again, we're still in that outer blue circle. We're instructional leaders thinking beyond your own classroom. Think of your whole school or your whole school district. It's going to take years, according to change research and according to our experience with inquiry science, for example, it's going to take years to really implement carefully and fully the Common Core state standards and the next generation science standards. Often our work with principals and school district leaders revolves around these three phases. Pre-implementation itself can take several years. The implementation phase to roll out these standards and really have them in place in everybody's classroom in your school system, that may take many, many years. I think from our lessons learned from inquiry science reform, we're in about year 10 and we're still working in the implementation phase while we're working towards maintenance of sustainability. So we're going to work on a problem of practice, thinking about those phases. Now in Common Core, you might be further along. The next generation science standards, we're all in the pre-implementation phase since they haven't been published yet. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of a problem of practice for the instructional leader in our region. In Washington State, there's a school district I work with frequently. They're in the town of Everett. It's a large urban school district, and they're in the pre-implementation phase, getting ready to really thoughtfully and strategically implement both Common Core and the next generation science standards. So they're in this phase of building some readiness and building capacity. They are building and actually running a professional development system to get teachers to collaborate. They're using their instructional coaches to lead that work in partnership with the Institute for Systems Biology, for example, and they're collaborating to really infuse these standards with their best teaching strategies, and they're using a common vision that they've developed for what the instruction can look like if these standards are put in place in their math and science classrooms. So that's kind of the context. The problem of practice for the leaders in that district, specifically the building principals in the middle and high schools, their problem of practice is to learn how to find evidence of student learning, specifically in science classes and also a little bit differently in their math classes. So while the teachers are working on professional development for this system I just described, the principals in their blue outer circle there are learning how to do the same kind of work for their role as a building principal. They're learning how to really go into a math classroom or a science classroom and know what to look for and know when to recognize when students are really learning these standards or these practices or cross-cutting themes that are in our standards. That's just one example of a problem of practice for the principals. I'll give you a different example for our state leaders in Washington. They're also in the pre-implementation phase, thinking about how to build more capacity to build on the success of work they've initiated, just begun with the Common Core, and build more capacity for the next generation science standards. So they've set up these collaboratives or networks of school districts across our state, and they're working on, as their problem of practice, how do they get the regional science education leaders to really build a shared vision and common messaging so that all these different collaboratives across the state can portray a vision of what the next generation science standards can look like, regardless of the region or the size of the school district or the community characteristics, things like that. So that's a second problem of practice example. And what I'd like to do now is get us to look at this slide for a couple minutes, and then I'll let you do the survey. A problem of practice that might fit your role might fit into one of these characteristics, A, B, C, or D. If it does, you'll be able to answer our survey that way, and if one of these doesn't fit your role, feel free to type in something specific in the chat bar. So let's look at these for a minute. For example, if your situation is like A, you might be wondering as a principal, how do I learn enough about the new standards in order to support my system of teachers? Or D, for example, if you're a teacher, you might wonder, how do I help my principal empower me in a leadership role to support others in their use of the standards? And so on. So I'll let you read those for a minute, and then I'd like to invite you to take this survey and either select A through E or type in your own idea in the chat.
Thanks, Caroline, and everyone. Your poll buttons are active, so you can go ahead and select the best response for you. We're really interested in hearing about what you think is your own personal challenge with this issue. And for those who joined us a little bit late, your poll buttons are located under your own name at the top of the participants window. You will see a button that has an A on it, and if you mouse over that, you can pick A through E. And if one of these doesn't happen to fit your situation and you think that another option would better describe you, you can go ahead and type in the chat there as Mark and Melissa have done. And I'll give just another moment here for folks to select a button on the poll list if they are planning to. I know that some will be selecting other and type in the chat, so we're not going to have 100% response on these, but it looks like we've already got most of those in there. So I'll go ahead and lock the poll and publish a graph to the whiteboard so that we can all take a look here. And I'll go ahead and squeeze this down so we can still see everything on our screen. It's a little bit small, but I think we're all going to be able to see what we've got. And Caroline, I'll turn that back over to you to discuss.
Thank you, Bryn. Interesting survey results, you guys. Thank you for voting. It's interesting to think about your role beyond your classroom and to think about your role as an instructional leader. We often, as a group of working with principals and other school district leaders, we find that they often will talk about their problem of practice more in terms of what the teachers have to do. But it's really good to pull out and think of what are these problems of practice for an instructional leader to do that can support behind the scenes the actual work of the teachers. So it's interesting to see you making those choices. I know we have one principal here today, so they picked C, which is great. And I'm looking at some of the other responses coming in. I'd like to have my colleague Pat Ehrman just give you one other example to come along with the different ideas I'm seeing in the chat box. So Pat?
Great. Caroline, thank you. We were fortunate to receive a call from a school district who wanted to, especially at the high school level, enhance the faculty's understanding of formative assessment. And so we actually worked across A with the principal. He had a pretty broad understanding of it, but there were pieces that were new, and we supported him with his role in learning about it before he facilitated in front of his staff. And also we worked with the principal in Area C. So how he was to prepare teachers and work with teachers to support this evaluation in science. And then we've had a number of non-PD conversations about how he supports capacity, what things he's doing within the building after the professional development. So our work really bridges a number of these topics in terms of professional development to support a problem of practice.
Thank you, Pat. So thank you all for writing in with this survey here. I think it's one of the outcomes of this web seminar today that we wanted you to at least think about what your problem of practice might be in this leadership role. And I just want to preview what's coming ahead. At the last part of our webinar, we're going to hear about the problems of practice from a principal and from a science teacher leader in school. So that's coming up. Let's keep going then, and I want to share a couple other tools that may help with the problem of practice then and what you do with that information. So I'm going to move ahead here to part 3. Part 3 is really another set of tools that helps an instructional leader make some decisions around that problem of practice. In other words, what action steps do I need to take? What things do I need to consider? How do I monitor progress and change along the way? So I'm going to do a quick refresher of 2 tools that many of you may have heard about before, the concerns-based adoption model. It comes from this book. I highly recommend this as a resource for instructional leaders. If you haven't looked at this in a long time, I highly recommend it. It's called Implementing Change, Patterns, Principles, and Potholes. It's very user-friendly, very practical guide, and I'm going to highlight a few of the tools that are in this book that principals and science coaches and teacher leaders have found very helpful over the last few years. So 2 of the tools in this book are levels of use, for example, in our case, of the new standards. What level are people using the Common Core State Standards in its first phase of rollout? How can we measure the levels of use of the next generation of science standards over the next number of years? The second tool is stages of concern. What are people wondering about? What are they worried about? What are they concerned with that will help make decisions about professional development or other leadership moves? So we're going to show you a little look into these tools. For many of you, this will be a refresher. And if it's brand new, I highly recommend getting the book that has these tools built into it. We made a couple sample prompts as if you were teachers in our school district and we were giving this survey. So you don't have to write anything on the screen right now, but just think about to yourself. You can jot these answers down on paper or just think about them in your head. The levels of use kinds of prompts are on the left-hand side of the screen, and I use the Common Core State Standards as the example. So answer to yourself what you think about your school system's level of use for Common Core. I'll give you a minute just to think about those. And then when you're ready, look over to the right-hand column. The stages of concern has some statements that you could answer for yourself about the Common Core, just to uncover where maybe your individual worries are, concerns are, or maybe your whole maybe your whole math department. Think about what your math department's answers would be to those prompts. So in this book, these CBAM tools, levels of use and stages of concern, are presented either as questionnaires or as survey instruments to basically take the temperature of the group that you're working with and they can be used multiple times during implementation. For example, we've used these for years as we've moved inquiry science practices out to different school districts, and we're still using them today. They last for years and years of working on an education innovation. So it might be an interesting thing to think about doing this kind of surveying of the groups that you are a leader of at different times in your next few years of the Common Core and the NGSS rolling out. I'm going to go ahead then to a survey, and you can actually vote on here so we can see what the whole group is thinking. I'd like you to think about the Common Core state standards, and I'd like you to think about most teachers in your school building or in your school district. Which level of use of the Common Core are you at? You can go ahead and put a clip art into either the school or the district zone on the screen.
And for those of us who weren't online for the beginning where we practiced during our introduction with our clip art, it is located on the toolbar, which is alongside of your participants window. It's the bottom button there with the mountain and the sun over it, and if you select common symbols, you'll be able to find a piece of clip art. I see that we've already got a number of folks placing their clip art, and I'll just remind everyone that we do have a large group with us this evening, so if you can try to be as neat with your clip art as you're able to. I know it's hard sometimes on the screen to get it right exactly where you want it, but if we can try to focus on keeping it off of our text so we can still continue to read what Caroline has put on the screen as the behavioral indicators, I think that it should work for all of us. And it looks like everyone's doing great so far. And Caroline, it looks like we've got quite a range here across the different categories.
Yeah, this is fun to see, Bryn. Thank you. It just shows that as we're making big change in a school system, we've got people at all different levels over time. And again, the time from this change research is years and years. So those of you that have teachers up in the renewal phase, I bet they've been working on the Common Core as teacher leaders for a while now. But you can see that a tool like this, and this is only a survey instrument here, this is a summary instrument to look at where people are in your school system. You can imagine as a leader that you could give this kind of a survey to subgroups. You could give this to just coaches. You could give this to a group of brand new teachers. You could give it to a group who has taken this survey for 4 years in a row with you and keep following the progress of the group. And this levels of use is just very handy tool for an instructional leader to make decisions by for your next steps. So I'm not going to give you the same survey for the next generation science standards because they haven't been published yet. But you can predict where your people are now and where they may be a year from now. It's going to take a while to move from non-use up through orientation and preparation until we even make it up into those upper zones of mechanical use and regular routine use. So it's a really nice tool to keep in mind and to add to your toolbox as an instructional leader for ways to check the temperature of the whole group or of subgroups once or twice a year. Okay, thank you everybody. Let's look at kind of the flip side of the coin. It's one thing to use a new innovation like the Common Core state standards, but it's another thing to really look at how it's getting used and what's going to help move up in levels of use stages. So what are the concerns of your group? This is a summary of giving surveys to a whole group, and I want you to think about, again, where most teachers' concerns might be in your school or your school system. And go ahead and vote here about their stage of concern.
Okay, everyone, your screen marking tools are active again, so you can pick that clip art and place it there in the space next to the level that best expresses the concern for the group that you are thinking about, your school or district. And again, it looks like we've got a lot of great responses coming in, and folks are doing a great job of keeping that off of the text so we can still read our categories. And this one, it looks like we've got a spread again, Caroline.
Yeah, and the change research shows that paying close attention to these stages of concern is really important in moving forward. Even teachers who self-report they're at a fairly high level of use may be holding themselves back actually through their concerns. And it's a nice idea to be reminded, again, as the instructional leader, to check in on both of these facets of change with the groups of teachers or teacher leaders that you're working with. So again, I want to just reiterate the change research tells us that to implement a new innovation, such as our Common Core or our next generation standards, we need to make that vision happen in every single classroom. So to keep the focus on every classroom, it's really important to check in through these surveys periodically on the individuals in your system, individuals in your school or individuals across the whole district. These are really nice tools for summarizing then where people are in their use of the new standards, but also in their concerns. And then as an instructional leader, this helps you make decisions about your next steps, next professional development that might be needed to define maybe next steps, forming some teacher leader work. And we'll hear some examples about this a little bit later this afternoon in our web seminar in part 4. So to summarize this part of our web seminar, I just wanted to highlight the fact that as a leader, thinking of that outer blue circle, not the teacher's work, but as an instructional leader, this is a really nice set of tools to think beyond just a plan. It gives you, through a lot of the work that's in this book, you can take the results of the survey and figure out what your next steps will be. So it's a decision-making tool based on evidence and based on repeated data collection from giving these kinds of questionnaires and surveys. Okay, thank you all. So I'm going to pause for a moment here and let you chime in. Let's think about those CBAM tools for collecting data for which to base your next leadership steps, either the levels of concern or the levels of use, or the stages of concern. Think about that for a moment and chime in if you would like into the text box, and let's see what you're thinking about these tools as a way to help in the instructional leadership role, build some readiness, and measure your progress along the way.
Thanks, Caroline. Again, we'll take a couple of volunteers to type on the screen and invite everyone else to type there in the chat. If you didn't get a chance to type on the screen last time, feel free to raise your hand and I will give you the tools. If Melissa, who I know volunteered last time, wants to raise her hand again, I will give you access to that. If anyone else would like to volunteer, I'll also let Caroline chime in. A few people are asking if you can explain the, or just spell out the CBAM acronym again. I'll give Miriam the tools while you respond to that one, Caroline. Caroline, don't forget to hit your talk button.
Thank you. So Bryn, did you get some volunteers to respond there?
We got Mary Ellen has the tools, but we've got a few folks that are asking just for some clarification on what you're looking for.
Okay. Let me go back a slide or two to these two tools. We practiced a little bit thinking about levels of use of the Common Core standards in our school, and you rank them from non-use up to renewal. We looked at the second tool, the stages of concern that teachers in your system have about implementing Common Core state standards, and we got a lot of people in consequence and management levels of concern. So the question is, just thinking about those, how could either of those be helpful in your work as an instructional leader in your school or in your school district? Is that helpful? Yeah, I see the prompt coming in about comfort level implementing the standards, and that's so important to know where individuals are in your group along that comfort continuum and that concerns continuum. So the levels of use and the stages of concern are surveys that are really friendly and helpful to give different groups of teachers year after year after year and keep tracking their change. It really builds a system of trust and feeling that they have input and that their concerns are heard. From that end, and from the principal or the instructional leader's side of the picture, it's really helpful in making decisions about how fast to take some next steps, or when to back up a little bit, or when to add more specific professional development to help the teachers gain their confidence and their comfort level to move on to the next stages in your vision. I'm just taking a minute to look in the chat here if there's anything else. Yeah, I like the comment about it lets teachers see that they're maybe not alone in the way they're thinking about this change. I think that's so important. And these survey tools are nice because they have a way to summarize a group's results that are very clear. So teachers can see where they stand in relation to others. And it is very comforting when the change process can be very frustrating and uncomfortable. So that's a nice point. Thank you. Yeah, the idea of shared leadership comes through nicely with these tools as well. And as I mentioned before, and I want to just strengthen this point, it's nice to be able to give these questionnaires and surveys to different groups. They'll have different sets of responses. You know, the teacher leader group may respond one way. First-year teachers may respond another way, and so on. And it's nice to separate those out sometimes when you're collecting this kind of data. Thank you for your responses. Let's keep moving forward, and we'll come back to this idea when we hear comments from our New York principal and teacher leader. I'm going to give you just a moment if you want to ask any questions. I'm seeing some in the chat that I can respond to, but if there's anything else you want to write in these boxes about what's pretty clear so far and what's still muddy, I'll just remind you that we've talked about this zone, this blue circle of instructional leadership, defining your own problem of practice, beyond teachers' problems of practice, but what is the instructional leader's problem of practice? And we've talked about reminding ourselves to use these two tools from CBAM, the levels of use and stages of concern. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and if you want to give me some feedback, great, and then I'll move ahead.
And folks, if you'd like to raise your hand to type in the text boxes on the screen, you can click on that hand button, and that'll bring you to the top of the list. If there's anything that you would like to get some clarification on from Caroline, you can do that, or you can feel free to type it in the chat window. Okay, Katie, I'll go ahead and give you access to the whiteboard tool so you can click on the text box, which is the fourth one down, and then type your question or your comment there on the screen. And Maria, I'll go ahead and give you the tools as well. Feel free to type your feedback there on the appropriate box on our whiteboard. Caroline, we've got a great question there. I think it's from Katie, the first person to type there on the screen. She wanted to know if there are any resources that offer sample lesson plans that she can share. And maybe Wendy or even Adaliz or Sal have thoughts on that as well.
Bryn, could you repeat the question she has?
Sure. I'm just looking at the question that Katie typed into our whiteboard space right here. She said that someone mentioned in the chat that giving teachers example lesson plans would be a way to help them feel less overwhelmed and visualize what the standards look like. And so she was wondering if there are any resources out there currently that offer sample lesson plans.
Thank you. I was looking in the wrong spot. Thank you. I would actually like to throw that to Wendy for NSTA resources.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Can you, I'm always not clear. Bryn, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Wendy. Go ahead.
Okay. There's many questions about what NSTA has that you can look at, from possibly lesson plans to the Stepping Stones article I talked about, and Bryn put a link up. So I just want to say a little bit about that, and then I think, Caroline, I'm going to give you a little bit of a charge to give them a quick review of how CBAM fits in here. So as many people asked about, and what Bryn put up, NSTA, I'll say this quickly because I don't want this to take up the whole time, but I do want you to explore this resource that we have. NSTA received a Carnegie grant to form what we've called Compass, because we are going to be as being NSTA, the main source for implementation of NGSS. So right now what we've been doing is all really in what Caroline discussed in the pre-implementation phase, and what can you do now, and there are many questions in the chat room about that. So on our website, if you go to that link, or if you just go to our main website, there's an orange and blue NextGen icon that will take you to our Compass site, or the link that Bryn gave you. And in there, we have everything from archived webinars on every science and engineering practice, to the article I discussed, to the study guide I just put up in the chat room. People are asking, what can you do right now with your group to get familiar? There's a wonderful guide to the framework written by Harold Pratt that has suggested action to take now. Also on the Compass site, there's a whole study guide. If you wanted to sit down with a group within your school or PLCs across schools or just your coaches and take a look at the framework and use the questions in our study guide to get a handle on the culture of the school and the classroom and your district that is needed to support the actual standards. In terms of looking at what does this all look like, we're all at the beginning of this together. The standards are just coming out in final draft form. So if you haven't thought about going to San Antonio, and please, I'm not pitching this so that we get more money at our national conference. We have some incredible programs around just the question that's in the muddy box here. We do professional development institutes. I'm actually the point person for them. They are pre-cons on Wednesday, and 2 of them are specifically about what does this look like in the classroom? What is the vision of NGSS? And Roger Bybee and Kim from BSCS Times, and he's been one of the lead writers on the standards and coordinators, and Mario Milano, who wrote the engineering, they are doing 2 different in-depth pre-cons on what it looks like in the classroom. This is the first time we're doing something like this, and it won't be the last. So if you don't get to San Antonio, we are going to do more things like this webinar around the vision, more at our regionals, putting out more on our website, putting things in NST reports and in our journals. So I can't hand you something right now. I wish I could to clear up that mud part. But we are on the road to that. We're building the vision with our membership together. So I highly recommend taking a look at what we are doing in San Antonio and our upcoming regionals and on that Compass website. And at the end, I'll put up my email. I'm happy to address any more of these questions in depth. I check my email all the time, and being in the PD department, I'm here as a resource for you. And I don't want to take up more time, but Carolyn, I think maybe if you could reiterate how CBAM is a framework for looking at the impact of a change that isn't specific to NGSS or Common Core, but it is specific to how people embrace change and how to go about it. I hope that helps. I'm going to pass it over.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate before we move ahead, maybe this is actually a problem of practice for some of you to learn from these resources that Wendy's just describing to find out what is a good vision for implementing these next generation science standards and the Common Core state standards. How can I share this vision with others in my school? How can I share this vision then with others across all the schools in my district? That might be a really great problem of practice for some of you to leave this web seminar with and attacking that. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, and the CBAM tools, I want to move ahead to part 4 so that you can see how they've been helpful in a real situation, and then I'll come back at the end to summarize their usefulness. So part 4 of our seminar today is what's working now and how can we use an example from a middle school in New York City to look back on some of these instructional leadership strategies. So I'm going to turn the mic over now to Dr. Salvador Fernandez and Adaliz Gonzalez. They'll share with you their problem of practice and some of their really effective strategies in their building. Welcome, you two.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for us to share our work. We're a little school in the northern tip of Manhattan, and you can see 575 students, 98% Hispanic, 62% are English language learners, and 50% special needs. Give you a little context about the school. We've been in partnership with the General Electric Foundation now. This is our 4th year, and we have also built a bridge with NSTA and NASA in the last 2 years of our work. We've been grappling with the Common Core Learning Standards now for 2.5 years. And the work of our school is not only focused on creating a more engaging and challenging classroom. And like it says there, we have worked very hard on building an infrastructure that promotes a community of learners and reflective practitioners. So we provide our teachers, or I provide our teachers with 3 hours and 15 minutes a week of professional development time. They have 2 90-minute blocks, one to plan units of studies, and the other one to do inquiry work, looking at student work. And then we have 50 minutes for them to enhance their content practice. So a lot of the questions that I read dealt with time and resources, and I think one of the things, we had the same type of questions, but I felt that we needed to really invest time for teachers to unpack these standards, and as you're going to see in the presentation, we have also acquired the services of consultants to assist us in the learning. Our presentation is going to be a tag team, so Adaliz is going to come now and going to share the teacher perspective. Adaliz?
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Adaliz Gonzalez. I am a science teacher and science coordinator at IS-52. I have been there for 10 years. I'm working with Salvador Fernandez for 7 years, and I can tell you that the work that we have been doing is, first, it takes a long time. It takes patience and consistency to implement the practices. We have been working with the Foundation for 4 years now, since 2009 in the city. And the first thing that we started working with the teachers in school to implement these changes, it was building trust and collaboration among the teachers. So that is very important for us to do. We are in the professional stage in which teachers respect the expertise of each other, and we collaborate in planning with colleagues, not only for science content, but across content areas. And we're moving from the traditional teaching that includes the planning. That's why in the slide before, in the problem of practice, we can see that it is important for the teachers to collaborate, incorporating purposeful lessons that include a holistic context in which we're moving not only from teaching only the science content, but also integrating the math as well as integrating the literacy. So in our teaching program, we have time to meet as a team. We have time to meet as in our content areas, and we have time to meet as well as a STEM team. This is the first year that we are working at integrating STEM. So we are exploring together, the science and math teachers, we are exploring together how we are going to integrate our content, talking about content in math, content in science, in specific lessons that we're targeting to help the students meet the standards.
So that leads us to the area on top. We have developed a professional environment of innovation and reflection. And you could go on to our website if you want to check some of the units of studies that we have already uploaded that are embedded with the Common Core Learning Standards and Literacy, Mathematics. And now we're dabbling with the next generation of science standards, even with the draft, and our teachers are becoming familiarized with that. But you hear a lot about professional learning communities. We feel that we are developing a professional environment of innovation and reflection, which provides the teachers to use their imagination and put best practice in place and then reflect on it by looking at student work to see if the product that we're looking, that the students are producing are to the highest quality possible. Our school has the infrastructure already, but it took us 7 years to get to this point that promotes a community of learners and reflective practitioners.
In terms of, I am going back into the slide because in terms of providing resources and planning, it is very important to understand that administrators include teachers, not only teacher leaders, but all the teachers in the process of creating teaching programs, which I am highlighting there, to make this effort working. We started planning now in January what is going to be our teaching program and our infrastructure in September. So it is very important to include everybody, so every teacher has a voice in the process of planning, and including all the resources that we have developed through the teacher team meetings that we have. We, the teachers, we have time to meet additional after school, during Saturdays. The conversations that we have include the content, like I said before, teaching methodologies, and we are piloting lessons in which we are reflecting and going on the implementation, integrating the specific content that we are talking about, and seeing how the teachers are integrating their specific content and the literacy that includes math and science as well. We're piloting right now STEM lessons, not units, because a unit can sound very overwhelming for teachers to develop. So taking it step by step and leading the teachers to say, just let's explore the area in developing one lesson to see how it looks like and implement it in the classroom, and then go back and reflect on it sounds more reasonable for them and more comfortable in doing so.
Thank you. We have also hired consultants to provide feedback in the revising of our STEM units. We just piloted this year 4 electives in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So our electives are engineering, astronomy, environmental study, and robotics. Luckily enough, we have teachers. We have 3 teachers in the school that were that in their prior life they were engineers. We had 2 teachers in our schools that also did the robotics after school club, and now they're doing it during the day in the elective. We have 1 teacher that has been doing environmental study in the school now for 4 years. And of course, Adaliz, my partner here, has taken on the charge of leading the astronomy class. And most of the lessons that we get in units are coming from NASA website. The teachers, leaders in our school participate in the Common Core Lab Site program that's part of the New York City Department of Education in partnership with the General Electric Foundation. That's 10 teachers that go for professional development 1 day a month. They go and they're vetting units of study that are aligned to the Common Core in literacy and math. They're looking at student work, and they're providing feedback. And thus a pilot of 60 schools throughout the city, and we have close to 1,700 schools in the city. So only 60 of us are really working, and we've been part of that pilot now for the last 3 years. When they return from their session, they share with other teachers during the common planning time any new learning experiences that they encounter. Adaliz?
Yeah, one of the things that we did before 2 years ago when we started going to the Common Core Lab Site workshops was to revise our curriculum to meet the selected standards that we have in school to develop performance tasks. Those tasks were vetted by the lab team, and right now we are developing performance tasks which are going to be included in the units. Small tasks that are going to be doable in 1 or 2 or 3 lessons that help students in meeting the Common Core. Now, this is what we're talking about is Common Core standards. Right now, we are in the stage of studying that last draft that came on December. So one of our teachers in the science department took the lead to start a study circle with the science department to study the next generation science standards along with the framework with 3 goals in mind. Number 1, to develop a common understanding of the next generation science standards. Number 2, to understand the implications and the instructional shifts. And number 3, to understand that it's not just additional set of standards, they are integrated and they can complement the efforts of the Common Core standards in building literacy through science. So we are starting doing this, so when the standards come, we are a step ahead into, let's say, looking how and studying and analyzing how the standards look like in the classroom, and not taking as an overwhelming effort as a different set of standards, but how they're going to complement each other.
And we focus on the shifts. In mathematics, we focus on the rigor, on the focus, coherent, and rigor. In ELA, we also have embedded into our science units of study the informational texts that are text complex by grade level. We also are using the academic language amongst all content area, how they connect to each other, and also getting the students to cite from textual evidence is very important in the work, and you could see that across the school. And that's the coherent piece that we have, and we have also we again spend a lot of time getting teachers to make their thinking visible, become critical thinkers for themselves, and then that gets delivered to the students in the classroom. So in their delivery of instruction, you see that the teachers are really eliciting from students their thinking about a particular topic that they're covering, and we monitor that through a teacher intervisitation group of about 9 teachers that are scheduled regularly to go and visit their partner teacher, and their partner teachers go and visit them once a month. And also the supervisors, we do the informal observations. So we have been also fortunate to have partnership with Urban Advantage, which is a science partnership with the city. We have the GE Foundation, NSTA, NASA. We have Columbia University School of Engineering, and also their TREES program. And then teacher leaders share all their experience. So that community of learner, our teachers are constantly going out to gain information, gain knowledge, and you could see that in our website. If you go onto the first slide, inwood52.org, and you go under academic programs, and everything that we do is there. And I just want to say, anyone that's in the New York area and wants to come and visit us, please come and see our school. And you can see at any time that the kids are engaged in critical thinking type of activities throughout the day in our building. With that, Adaliz is going to finish our presentation.
Yes, I wanted to add also that I saw a question before about sample lesson plans and units and how does this look like. We are very glad to share our work. If you want sample performance tasks and units in science that are aligned to the Common Core, please feel free to email us. Through our website. And also, you can go to the New York City website and look for the Common Core library. There is sample performance tasks there aligned to the Common Core as well. And just to finish, in the creating a context to support the change, it is very important to the administrators to attend the PD with teachers and visit the content or common planning meetings to see the difference and to make a difference into the classroom. So if you teachers, I invite you to invite your administrators to go to your content area meetings, and also invite them to go to the conferences with you as well. That makes a whole lot of the difference.
Thank you both very, very much. You have an incredible story to tell at Inwood Intermediate School. Thank you, Sal and Adaliz. In our last moment, some of you have been writing in. I just wanted you to think about some of those strategies. And if one of you would like to share an idea in this box, that's great. Otherwise, it's just about time for us to close. So I might take one comment.
Kate, thank you for raising your hand. I'll go ahead and give you the tools so that you can type in. And I'll give also, I think we've got room for all three, so I'll go ahead and give to Maria and Melissa, and go ahead and we'll set a timer here for 1 minute, and then we can move on from that. How does that sound, Caroline?
Perfect. Thanks, Bryn. Thank you for your feedback, everyone. It's great to hear these real stories and some of your real strategies that are working. Our time is ending, so I want to just leave this last slide up for a moment that has the resources. Sal and his group of leaders that have been participating in NSTA's GE partnership have been in a book study using this top book, Leaders of Learning, and they've enjoyed the lessons learned in that book very much. So I highly recommend Leaders of Learning to all of you that have a role as an instructional leader. Obviously, the frameworks for K-12 science education is there. Some of you were asking earlier in the chat about the Change book that's highlighted here, and they also have a website, fedl.org, and all of these tools are available in the book. Levels of use, stages of concern, and other tools such as innovation configurations, and on and on. Lots of great resources for the instructional leader. And another article that I really like, their call to action near the end of the article is highlighted here, Meet the Promise of Content Standards, the principle. It's got some nice strategies at the end of that article. So again, just looking back, I hope all of you can take away this idea of a problem of practice beyond your own classroom and think of instructional leadership roles for helping really complementing the next generation science standard rollout with the work done in the Common Core in your school or system. And a reminder to use some of our favorite tools out there for years and years, the levels of use and stages of concern, and the very generous contact from Sal and Adaliz to take a look at some of the work going on in their school. So I want to just give you my thanks for joining this web seminar today. I'm happy to follow up later, as Wendy also offered. My email is here, and I'm going to turn this over now to Bryn for evaluation and the informal Q&A.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and I would like to take a moment here not only to thank Caroline for being our featured presenter and putting together such a fantastic interactive presentation, but also take a moment to thank Dr. Fernandez and Ms. Gonzalez for sharing their information about their own school. It was great to have a look at how it's working at IS-52. And I also wanted to thank Wendy Binder for sharing some information from the NSTA side of things. Everyone, let's use our emoticon button, that's the one with the face on it, and select the applauding hands to give all of our presenters a round of applause. And I would like to thank everyone who participated this evening for your interaction and your great comments. It was fantastic to hear from you as well. And we would like to show our appreciation to the GE Foundation for sponsoring today's web seminar. A thank you as well to the administration of NSTA for their support for web seminars. And here's a look at our upcoming web seminar calendar. You can get a look at some exciting NASA content tomorrow, joining us for Engineering Design Challenge, Water Filtration, and again on Thursday, another design challenge, Lunar Plant Growth Chamber. Then next Tuesday on February the 12th, you can learn more about connections between the practices in NGSS, connecting those to Common Core Math and Common Core English Language Arts. You can register for these programs and more by going to learningcenter.nsta.org/webseminars. Thank you everyone for your participation today, and we look forward to seeing you again on another web seminar.